Slowly but surely, I've been getting back into PUBG, and it feels like that they've been heading down the right path with updates recently. One of those updates has actually come in the form of an Erangel remaster. I think most PUBG players have a fondness for Erangel. After all, it is the first map that we got to play, even back in alpha and beta, and as such we've all spent a lot of time on it. As players, we really wanted something new and fresh, and new maps are absolutely needed, we all said. And then other maps started to release and maybe we didn't like them all that much, so we just gravitated back to Erangel. I think Sanhok is a brilliant map and it works well, but Erangel will still hold the top spot in my heart, and now it's been remastered. Over the last couple of days, PUBG Corp allowed players to jump into a brand new version of the map on the test server, so some of you may have already been able to get a taste of this. Unfortunately, it's not live on the base game just yet, and in some parts it's not too different from the original map. In that sense, you can still know exactly where you are, but there are certain areas that are vastly different in visuals and design. And the core idea of this is to take the original map and bring it up to the same level of polish as some of the newer maps. Of course, maps like Vikendi and perhaps even Miramar already have a lot more detail in them, which isn't surprising really considering that they are much newer than Erangel. PUBG Corp wanted to go back to Erangel, blow out the cobwebs and give it a fresh lick of paint, and that's exactly what they've done here. So what's changed? Well, overall, there's a lot more detail and props around the map. You're definitely going to notice way more trees around than ever before, but that in itself isn't all that exciting. There have been some real improvements on textures throughout the map as well. Buildings in, let's say, Pachinki, down the containers in Novo, they've all had a huge upgrade and look way more detailed. Speaking of buildings, well, interiors have all been reworked with more detail, and some interiors have actually been changed somewhat too. There are also a few new areas that weren't there before and some heavily updated ones. One example is the prison, and this has completely changed from the base game. The outer warehouses are much smaller, there are far more props for detail, and even a large basketball court in the middle with bleachers. It looks really cool and new now. Another example is the power station. The entire area has been completely reworked. There are way more warehouses and buildings over there now, and the entire storm drain, if that's what it was, I don't know, is no longer there. The main building is now split into different sections too, and you can use the walkways to go between. I'd say that this is one area that perhaps you wouldn't recognise as being from Erangel straight away, if you didn't know where on the map you were. And of course this all sounds great, having those visual improvements to the map does make it look substantially better and more modern, more current, but the question is, does it improve gameplay? Well, the simple answer, I think, is probably not. I didn't get long to play the new map on the test server, so I definitely need more time when it gets tested again to properly get a feel for it. You could argue that more buildings, more cover, more foliage on a map that people thought was probably okay already may not be a good thing. But from my experience, the map still felt and played pretty similar to how it used to. And also, perhaps visibility will take an impact too. It's pretty hard to see people in PUBG to begin with, but with more detail, is that going to exacerbate the issue? But one of the biggest issues that I have with some of the newer maps in the game, when you have buildings every 2 meters or a large built up area that's got a ton of angles and windows, it becomes impossible to properly clear. There's just so many different angles to think about. And as a player, it makes me just want to avoid built up areas like that. And I don't think that's good for arena type gameplay. You can take your time and hopefully clear as much as you can, but someone could be hiding in any of those places completely silently, and that can make the game a bit more frustrating at times. I remember when Miramar first released and I just didn't enjoy it pretty much for that exact reason. So I hope they focus on improving the gameplay of Erangel with other means rather than just adding a ton of new buildings. Perhaps natural cover is a better route here. Loot is also one way to do that too, and there have been some changes there as well. Now, some players have expressed concern that the loot on Erangel is harder to come by compared to some of the other maps. I imagine part of that is the size. Sanhok, for example, has loot almost everywhere because it's a smaller map. I don't play Miramar very often, so I can't really compare that one. Either way, there has been a few tweaks to the spawn rate of assault rifles, DMRs and sniper rifles, which should appease those loot-hungry players. Overall, like I said, I didn't really spend much time here, but I did enjoy the remaster. I got to play the original map that I loved, but with enough visual improvements and changes that it still felt fresh, which I think is great. Maybe it will even bring some players back to the game who want to try it out. Right now though, there's still a testing phase, so it will pop in and out of the test server. And I think their goal is to release it onto the live servers sometime in the summer, or presumably when they're happy with it and they think it's ready. It's not just Erangel either though. This may be the first map to get a rework in PUBG, but they've said that they want to look at Miramar and Vikendi too to make sure that they offer up the best experiences as well in terms of balance and loot. It's also amazing to think, but PUBG apparently still doesn't know what settings are best for the blue zone, because that's also been tweaked on the test server. It's an ever changing dynamic, the blue, and so I suppose it does need to change based on the player meta, but on the test server there have been some experimental changes for testing. Essentially, the timings of the blue zone are faster throughout the game, but the delay is reduced in the beginning. And on top of that, the size of the first safe zone is reduced earlier in the game, and while the speed of the blue zone is reduced in early and mid game, it has increased damage in the later stages. And I do wonder how different, let's say, the pro players who are playing in tournaments and practicing against top level players all the time think of the current state of the game compared to, say, the average Joe who jumps on with his or her friend. I wonder if there's a large separation there in terms of map balance and loot. And I know that from watching a few tournaments here and there and reading comments on Twitter that grenades, for example, are bonkers in the pro scene as they are so powerful. See an enemy, tag them up and then carpet bomb with grenades. They either don't move and die, or they do move and you shoot them. Of course, it's not always as simple as that when you're playing against top level opponents, mind you. But I do feel that these circle changes definitely speed up the rounds a bit, and I'm all for that. I think when it gets to the real end game though, it's important that you can move faster than the circle to avoid a large percentage of players just being killed by it and not actually fighting, which is the best part about the game. But moving on for a second, if you've been watching my recent PUBG videos, you may have heard me talk about the new weapon mastery system that was added to the game. And this is a new system that allows you to rank up each weapon by playing with it in game. And by doing so, you earn rewards. It's a pretty in-depth system, but as of now, it's only been on PC. We got our first taste of it in April, but later this month, it's coming to the console version too. There's a ton of grinding that you can do on each weapon, so I imagine that it will go down well with new and old players alike. And they're also adding in the auto-equip attachment system with this console patch, which means that there'll now be an optional automatic system whereby attachments will equip to the correct weapon for you when you pick them up, specifically to save time when you're using a controller. The idea is that you'll spend less time in your inventory, which is naturally quite hard to do on console, especially compared to PC. I honestly don't know how PC players would feel having this, but I'd be fine with it. Of course it is designed for console because it's just harder to navigate the inventory, but I feel that it's a quality of life improvement that PC players would enjoy too. Perhaps it wouldn't be for everyone though, as it definitely would dumb the game down a little bit, for want of a better term. Either way, interesting to see some good console changes coming down the pipeline. Wrapping things up for today guys, I think the remaster is a good step to bring Erangel in line with some of the newer maps that PUBG have released, but they've got to be careful with this. By changing iconic areas that players drop and especially adding in more buildings and cover, you run the risk of upsetting some of the die-hard players that have grown to love the original map. Like I said earlier, I haven't visited every point on the map, so I'd need more time with this, but I did really enjoy my time playing it, and I'm definitely going to jump in again the next time it's released on the test server. As far as I know, unfortunately there isn't a set release date yet for this to come to the base game. Obviously I think a lot of people will be hyped for this, but there may be some time to wait before it's quote unquote official. But for now, this is the best we got. With that said, I'm going to leave it there guys. I hope you enjoyed this one. Let me know if you got to play the map yourself, your thoughts on it. If you liked this video, give it a like. If you didn't, a dislike, subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one.